the cheater in chief, Joe Biden caught red-handed with a note card that appears to include a reporter's question right before he called on her. How convenient. Biden holding his first news conference after announcing he is running for re-election. And it turns out what was on Joe's card was indeed very similar to the question he got asked. The White House says it's no big deal, yet couldn't explain why he needed it in the first place.
It is entirely normal for a president to be briefed on reporters who will be asking questions at a press conference and issues that we expect they might ask about. Do not have specific questions in advance. That's not something that we do. And in fact, I would point out the questions that was asked was different than what was on the card that you all saw.
But I guess he couldn't get a cheat sheet for this moment. Biden actually got thrown off by a couple of youngsters on Take Your Child to Work Day.
Where are your grandsons or granddaughters?
I got one in New York, two in Philadelphia. There's three, because I got one granddaughter who is, I don't know. The last country I've traveled, I'm thinking what's the last one I was in. Yeah, you're right, Ireland. That's where it was.
Oh, and while Joe runs for cover from the friendly media, his challengers are lining up. Check out this new Fox News poll. RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson combined have nearly 30% of Democratic primary voters. But Whoopi says Democrats need to get behind Biden because, quote, we're trying to save democracy.
The person to do the job is doing the job.
Yeah.
You get behind him and we won't have a problem. The minute you start making inroads on maybe this person or maybe this person, we're done for.
Also,
so make a decision. Make a decision. He's done a lot for the country and he brought us back from the precipice. Maybe it's not a perfect country, but it's better than where we were.
Okay, I'll start with you, Katie. Shouldn't the President of the United States be able to go out and answer questions without a cheat sheet with questions on it? And I'm not talking about bullet points, which aren't unusual. I'm talking about specific questions, an uncommon level of specificity, in fact.
well, first, the response to Whoopi. I mean, it's amazing that the side of the political aisle who screams about protecting democracy isn't interested in having a simple debate. And if Joe Biden's record is so good, why not have him out there to defend his record and to talk to the American people and to reassure Democrats who are concerned about him running that he can handle the job. But this is embarrassing, I think, more for the media, because they're allowing the administration to push them around. The White House Correspondents Association should have more expectations than this. And the fact is that the president shows through these cards that he's not the one who's really in charge. It's the people who are writing the answers on these cards for him. He's not giving orders, he's taking orders. And I think there's big questions about that, given he wants to run for re-election. And he's supposed to be the guy who's elected and in charge, rather than bureaucrats who he hires to make decisions and talk about these big policy positions. But in terms of the media, and I covered the Trump administration and was in the White House a lot, and I got moved once from a press conference from the back of the room to the front of the room, and I was called on, and that was like a big mainstream media scandal, that they had moved me to the front of the room, so somehow there may be some kind of collusion. There was none, and this happens, and the White House and the LA Times are on the same page saying, we didn't talk about it, but we do talk about topics. The topics are pretty dang close to the question.
You know, Greg, this is the first press conference the president has had in, 178 days or something, and the first one after he announced for re-election. And the issue of age and his cognitive level came up, and he just said, watch me. Well, we did watch him, and it appears that the president was unable to answer questions after a meeting with the president of South Korea, where issues were discussed like microchips. And so you say to yourself, if he needs a card to answer the press, who is doing the negotiating with the president of South Korea? Did he have those note cards in those meetings and negotiations? Who is running it?
Well, that's the eternal question. I mean, this guy's so old, he better not renew his library card. Gets upset around green bananas. Think about this, though. When it came to, like, Donald Trump, the press was relentless. They peppered him with endless gotcha questions. They tried to trap him, they tried to humiliate him, and he still came at them at every moment. And here you have the press basically give this old fool a take-home test of what amounts to an answer key. And what's that say? As usual, they will always be in the bag for the Democrats, and they know that the guy they support is a hollow mess and needs all the help that he can get. And I don't blame Joe for pushing for these perks, but I do wonder if the press has to weigh a decision. It's like, if I'm going to get FaceTime, I better say yes to supplying the questions, because if I don't supply the question, I won't be able to ask the question. So instead, I'll just play along and maybe, you know, I'll get a promotion. But here's a great question for America. Do you really think you should vote for a candidate that The View endorses? The View. Have you seen The View? It's basically a shrink's waiting room in hell. If Joy's not apologizing for some bigoted remark, Whoopi's apologizing for some bigoted remark. Meanwhile, they indulge in Karen politics, right? It's like the bitter, unmarried white cat lady who, you know, stupidly gave all of her money to a BLM GoFundMe page. They're naive. They're stupid. Whoopi says we're better off now. What metrics is she using? Is she talking about inflation or war or crime or immigration? I think what she's talking about is her own emotional well-being. Like, this is what it's about. It's like, hey, at least we don't have Trump's tweets anymore. The country's screwed. But, you know, I don't wake up in the middle of the night and wonder what mean thing Donald Trump is going to say. I would take the mean tweets any day over the state of this country. And it's selfishness on the media's part that they don't realize that.
Well, yeah, and you know what? Even if they did, they wouldn't change their behavior in any event, because it's the same ideology. But Joey, I want you to listen to something that Van Jones said.
She is in such an unusual position. She's a woman, she's black, she's Asian, and she's running alongside the oldest person to ever do it. So she's essentially running for president. That's what she's doing. And I think people understand that, but I think she understands that. And I think that she's going to rise to the occasion.
I won't even go to the rise to the occasion part of it, but the idea that Van Jones, who's a Democrat, is like, it doesn't really matter what Biden is doing. She's running, and again, I guess they have to support her.
I think that probably scares the Democrats that are kind of in charge of Biden more than anything, is the idea that they may have to wake up one day and she's the boss, and she may not be the kind of herded sheep that Biden seems to be. I mean, the only thing I know that Biden has pushed back on from those that are kind of pulling the strings, or maybe the progressive left, two different groups there, those in the White House and the really loud progressives, is maybe domestic policy, maybe something like Afghanistan, like where he didn't listen to the generals and all the advisors and kind of stuck to his guns there. And, you know, when you look at like his granddaughter that he doesn't acknowledge, you can understand if you can leave a little girl hung out to dry, it's pretty easy to leave a few thousand Marines hung out to dry. If you can't be there for the most vulnerable within our society, how would you be there for those that are armed and trained to at least take care of themselves? So that's the category I put Joe Biden in. That's where he is. He is answering to people that are on his shoulders and guide him this direction. That includes the Easter Bunny, probably includes Kamala. I would venture to say she's probably a lot smarter behind the scenes than she shows herself to be, because I saw her up on the dais during those Senate confirmation hearings where she had preparation and she came out like a bulldog on attack. And that is not what we've gotten from her as vice president. And with someone like Sleepy Joe, that's what you would expect and probably want.
Okay. You know what, Jessica, you saw Joe Biden. He was like counting his grandchildren. I suspect he had a problem because there's one that the Bidens don't recognize, Hunter's child with a stripper, and also the last country that he was at. I mean, even he didn't remember where he was. So when Marianne Williamson, you know, slams the DNC for not holding primary debates, you know, is she indirectly saying Joe can't handle it and that's why they're not doing it?
I don't think she's saying he can't handle it. I think that she's saying that we should have a democratic debate about this, and that I deserve to be on the stage as much as anyone, and that it should be a choice. That's what democracy is.
Is she right?
So I think, and I've been consistent about this, I think he should do more press conferences. I think he should do debates. I think that he does better than people.
You think he can?
Yes, I do think
really
that
do.
He can. I really do, and I'm not just saying that because I get paid to sit here. I'm saying that because I actually think it. So it's great that those two things come together. I think that he does well. His off-the-cuff moments got him huge poll bumps in the Democratic primary. Remember, every time they kind of talked out of turn, people were like, that's the Joe Biden that we know. Mm-hmm. And if he is a complete disaster, then we deserve to know that as well. But I will say that the criticism of this that's being lobbed at the DNC, I did not hear lobbed at the RNC when they endorsed President Trump. Undivided support in February of 2019. There were 3 other candidates, Bill Weld, Mark Sanford, and Joe Walsh. And I'm not saying that they were getting tons of support, but those people were in the race and they were not given the chance to debate him. States turned to winner take all. They didn't even allow them to vote on these other possibilities. So come on, let's be a little bit fair about the criticism.
Those are even close to RFK Jr.
Well, first of all, let's see how well
Joe
RFK
Walsh,
Jr.
I mean, nobody even knows who he is.
I'm talking about
He's at 19%. No one even, he just announced last week on a video.
Okay, let's see where RFK Jr. is in a little bit, right? Let's give him a moment. He's a Kennedy. It's flashy. He has Cheryl Hines. I'd love to have Cheryl Hines by my side on this. But democracy is about principles. And if the principle is that there should be debates, then you should have thought that there should have been debates.
I think there should be debates in the Republican side coming up now. I think everyone should debate. I think the American people deserve that.
Well, there are a lot of
you don't want them to.
I doubt, and we can. If we get the tapes, we can roll them. I doubt that as many Republicans were as vociferous in their criticisms of the RNC.
90% of Republicans.
Primary debates for the Republicans. I mean, I just remember 17 on the stage.
No, 2016. I'm talking about 2020 when Trump ran for re-election. Well, of course, in 2016.
Yeah.
It was an open, Obama couldn't run again. But I'm talking about re-election.
All right. Well, I have a feeling he can't do it because he can't tell you how many grandchildren he has or where he was last week.
I'm sorry, Trump held cards that said, I hear you. What would you like me to know about your experience talking to Parkland families? That seems like you should be able to get that on right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.